Hey folks, James Millard here with Olympic Peninsula Skagit Tactics, and today we are going to be tying a cool summer steelhead fly called the Wickets Umami Shrimp. It's basically a temple dog style rendition of an alley shrimp. We've used it from Washington to Southern Oregon. It's been successful. You can tie it in a variety of sizes. You can tie it in a variety of colors. Moves great in the water. And it's just a fun pattern to tie all together, so check it out. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got a OPST 60 millimeter intruder shank that I have trimmed down to about 25 millimeters in the shank chuck. I'm using the Regal rotary shank jaws, but you use whatever you have to hold shanks. I'm using a Nano Silk 30D from Summer Fly. It's a really thin, really strong thread. It's great for tying in trailing wire, which is what we're going to do. We'll just start by running this down the hook, or down the shank, I'm sorry. Run this down the shank. Almost to the back, leaving maybe 1 millimeter in the back to allow us to mount our trailing wire. I've got an Eric's trailing wire hook at size 4, and it's attached to a piece of fire line is what I like to use. So we're going to tie in the fire line really short. We don't leave a lot. This is a 1-hook fly. It's not designed to change the hook out. So, and that's okay, because we're going to build this thing up to where it's not going to come apart on us. Bring your trailing wire up so you can get right to the end. Bring it on back down, and then just with about as much pressure as it takes to hold up a 6-pack, you're going to be giving that much pressure to each thread wrap. And that's why we're using this Nano Silk. Keeps the bulk down, and it is super duper strong, so you can really pour the coals to this. And you'll see there's a return eye on my shank right here. That's where we're going to stop winding, and we're going to fold the trailing wire back. We're just about there. Once we're there, we fold that trailing wire back on itself down the other side of the shank, and same pressure, touching wraps all the way down. That is going to build one strong body, and that trailer hook's not going to come out. I've never had a trailer hook come out, but I've heard of it happening, and it sounds like a nightmare scenario. Worst case scenario, you lose a fish. Best case scenario, you ruin a fly. Neither of those are okay with me. Bring your thread, once you've tied this all the way back down, bring your thread back up to that return eye. Next, we're going to cover those thread wraps with some Lagerton flat French braid. They call it French flat braid, but it's a really nice product as far as braids go. It's flat. It doesn't have a lot of the loops that are hanging out of it because the other brands that aren't, wound as tightly, stuff like that. Those little things help keep this fly durable. So we're using this Lagerton flat braid, tying it down over the return eye this time, covering that return eye. Trim your ends. You could have tied these all the way in, but there's no need to at this point. From here, we're going to use Hard as Hull penetrator. It's a pretty common. It's a pretty common brand of cement, but the penetrator isn't well known. It's a lot thinner, and so this is going to really soak in. A little on the top, a little on the bottom. Don't got to use a lot because it soaks in, like I said. Take that braid and just start winding it forward. I'm using a short piece here. You can use a longer piece if you'd like, but try not to waste materials. Tie it off on the bottom. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I tie in the front and the back just to really get that in there. Trim that off. A couple more turns of thread just to be secure, and then run your thread back onto the flat braid a little bit. Probably 2-3 millimeters back to where that junction was of the return eye, in that same vicinity. Doesn't have to be perfect, but from there you're going to tie in one of these Nature's Spirit rump feathers from the ringneck pheasant rumps. They're nice and long feathers. They look like spay feathers to an extent. They function in the same fashion. So just, you know, strip the fluff away from the bottom of your feather. And we're going to use quite a bit of this feather. We're going to use all the windable parts. And we're going to just tie it in by the tip, stripping all the fibers back. So here we go, tying it in. Bring that back. We've got our feather tied in. Now we want to scissor fold these hackles. Be very careful, make sure your scissors are closed, and just run it down the stem, run the tip down the stem. Trying to use the 90-degree angle on your scissor, and you can feel it. It'll go grrr, grrr on the scissors, and that's how you know you're folding it. So those are folded. From here, it gets pretty simple. We're going to use some Nature's Spirit African goat as a small dubbed body. You can use any. This is basically a seal substitute. You can use any seal fur substitute you have. We don't tie with seal in the United States, so we've got a plethora of natural and synthetic dubbings that do a pretty good job of mimicking that seal fur. So I like the goat, and I'm just dubbing it directly onto the thread. I'm not getting crazy. I got a little bit of wax here behind the seam that I dip on my finger, so it's keeping the dubbing tight on the thread. So now we're going to dub forward, pulling this feather out of the way, making sure we don't catch it. And we're going to roll the dubbing up, and we get to about here, and that's where we're going to stop that dubbing, because we've got a wing and some other stuff to tie in. So grab your hackle pliers if you've got a short stem, but with this feather, these stems can be a little brittle, so hackle pliers are always nice. And just start to wind this in a palmering fashion all the way up, pulling your fibers back as you go. And we're going to run out of body, but we're going to keep wrapping and just make a little collar in the front of the body, just like so. Tie her off. Make sure you really tie this off and trim it out. So now we've got not a terrible looking fly just to begin with, but now we've got our spay hackle tied in. Next step, we're going to be using some fin raccoon. This is also Nature's Spirit fin raccoon, I believe, but you can, whatever brand you prefer. There's a bunch out there. There's some Scandinavian brands. This fly is tied in kind of a temple dog fashion. Before we add that hair, I forgot, we've got our tippets. We don't want to forget these. This is going to give us a shrimpy effect on the inside of the fly. Get a decently long one. This is, again, Nature's Spirit dyed red. You can use natural, you can use dyed orange on this pattern. I'll use a lot of the orange on the other colors of these that I tie. So I'm stripping the fluff off the bottom of the feather, and then I'm going to kind of just roll it in my fingers. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just rolling it in my fingers a bit to try to get all the feathers, all the fibers I should say, together. So that's what you got. You install it right to where the dark tips come to the eye of your hook. That's your proportion. 6. I'm going to smoosh that down a little bit. Make sure it is centered over the top. And that's that. Don't need to get too crazy with that. We're going to trim it. And then we're going to add a little bit more glue. This is a good spot to reinforce your fly with just a tad bit of glue. You don't want this coming out. Run that thread up, run it back. Now we will use our fin raccoon to go over as an overwing. We don't want much, just about that much. You see? Not a ton. The cool thing about fin raccoon is it breathes really well in the water. So you don't have to pull out all that under fur and stuff like that that you do with other flies. I get it wet. I usually have a bottle of, or a cup of water with me, but I don't. So this live will have to do. Take any of the longer hairs that were on the back there that were curly cued out and just removed them. The measurement on this is just past the hook. You see, I'm but just like a 1/4 inch past the bend of the hook. Go ahead and drop this in. 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm using some good pressure on there. And you can see it comes out with a nice teardrop shape, which is going to look great in the water. So we will, now we trim this out. This is another place we're going to add some extra glue here in a minute. But trim this all away, leaving a little ramp. As you can see with the front of this, I left a little bit of a ramp. That'll make the rest of the tie-in go a little easier. As you see, this thread won't just keep slipping off, which is what we want to avoid. All right. So our teardrop shaped wing is in. From here, it's really pretty simple. We're going to add some holographic flashabou in red. This stuff is super shimmery in the water, and we're only going to use one strand down each side. So I'm going to cut one piece, run it under my thread, get it kind of running up the side. You'll see as I tie in the other side, I'll run my thread forward to fold this over, run my thread back, and I'm right down the side, I believe. Let me flip this and take a look. Yeah, I like that. So then I'll pull my my flash out and trim it even with the wing. I don't want it longer than the wing. I don't want it a ton shorter than the wing. I just want it even with this over wing. You don't have to be perfect with it, obviously. You don't want to be, but just to keep them from sticking together. But yeah. So we've got just a couple more steps and we're done. We're gonna add some red Nature Spirit Schlappen. Find a good feather here. There's a good one. Tie it in by the tip, and that's going to cover up the front of the fly. You have an alternative. You can also use another feather, another one of these rump feathers, to add some more boogie to the fly. I think we'll go ahead and do that really quickly. It just adds a few more barbels. It's kind of an overcaller. I don't always do it when I'm trying to really rank these things out quickly. I might skip this step, but we got time, so let's just throw this in here. Tie it down, come back, make sure you really have it in there. This is a great time to add the glue as well before you tie this stuff down. This little dauble of glue will soak all the way into those thread butt, or to those hair wing butts. So push that around so it doesn't cut or grab the barbels of this feather. Let's scissor fold this. I just like to use as much of this in the fly as I can because these are just a really nice substitute for a true spay hackle, or what we consider in the modern era a spay hackle, I suppose. So it just makes the fly look good, in my opinion, and so I'm gonna add a little extra. I wasn't gonna for the sake of time, but it's okay. Tie that off. And I wrap back into it pretty good, just to get those fibers running back. Now, our Nature Spirit Schlappen feather. Schlappen, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Schlappen. Goes in. And I'm going to tie all the way to the eye. Just giving myself a small base to work with because I'm going to use it all. I'm going to use that whole base and tie right up to the eye of the fly, which is a departure from traditional tying where you don't tie all the way to the eye and you leave a bodkin length from the thread and the eye. This is a bit of a departure from that, just because this is a modern fly and we're not going to be tuttle knotting it or riffle hitching it or anything like that. So 2, 3, yeah, it's probably good right there. I'll go one more just for giggles and trim this out. Pulling fibers back, making a tiny little head. It's not very good because we're going to add one more step. You don't have to do this. This fly can, or 2 more steps. This fly could be done now. I'm going to add some jungle cock to this, some jungle cock cheeks. I'm using the natural. You can use the synthetic. Semperfli makes a really good synthetic jungle cock eye, so I'd check those out if I were you, and you want to use cheeks on this. Get a couple of matching feathers, one from each side of the cape, and I'm just tying them in whole. You can fold the stems back if you need to. I don't on this particular. We don't have a ton of room in the top of the head, but the glue will keep this very, 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 very secure once I'm done. Actually, let's fold this one back. There we go. Sometimes folding the hackle or folding the nail back to tie into itself, A, adds a little bit of durability, but B, helps you set the jungle cock eyes correctly. But last step, we got our fish hunter rump feathers. So check this out. On the very bottom of the cape, you've got these kind of, I don't know, carapacey looking feathers. And so I'm going to take one of those that's complete, that doesn't have any tips missing. Strip off the fluff. Now I have kind of a carapacey looking feather. I'm going to tie it in over the top the way you would tie golden pheasant breast in for a general practitioner. Just right over the top. Kind of tent it with your fingers at the head. 1, 2, 3, 4 loose wraps. So you can position this right on top. And then we're going to, whoops, let's get some of this fluff out of here. Then we're going to finish it to the front. 6, flip it, tie it off on the bottom. And that, my friends, is an umami shrimp. In the interest of speed, we drop in 3 half hitches, 3 to 5 half hitches. It's a little faster than whip finishing for me. And in the production game, a lot of guys will tie just 3 or 4 half hitches in there and then drop glue on it, and that seems to hold really, really well, really well. So that's what we're going to do here. Move the thread till it doesn't move any longer. You know your half hitches are secure then. Trim it out. Hardest hole penetrator again. Right on the head. Don't worry if you get a little glue on the feather, that's not a bad thing. And then on the bottom. And we have ourselves an umami shrimp, folks. Not a hard fly to tie. Super effective summer pattern. And I hope you liked it.